Everybody, welcome to the Football Savant podcast. Travis Tyler, it's Tyler Williams, and today we're getting into weeks 7 and 8 of the NFL season. So, Tyler, we're going to start with Seattle in the NFC West, currently in first place. Do you think they can stay there for at least a while in this season?
I don't, Travis, that's a great question. I don't know about their staying power, but
Mm-hmm.
I do know this. It's cool to watch. I don't have any beef with Seattle. I think everybody wrote them off. I mean, Geno Smith.
Yeah,
We saw how that movie ended with the Jets, and then they lose Rashad Penny, and the O line was this big issue the whole time Russ was there. And man, I mean, they make that trade, and it's like, man, they're playing really, really well. And Penny goes down, and then Walker, the rookie, just steps right in. It's next man up. I mean, it just looks like they're getting back to the basics and saying, all right, we don't need to confuse ourselves. We're gonna not beat ourselves. If we lose, that's fine. We're gonna make you beat us though, and I like that.
yeah. I think to me, it looks like their offense is starting to rediscover that identity that they've always had of grounding the ball on the ground, then kind of use that play action off to those beast receivers that they have. And I think what could hold them back is that defense isn't playing like the Legion of Boom type of defense at all. I mean,
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. But you know what? I mean, fortunately, it's and I thought about that too. But fortunately, it's in a year where
you don't
I don't
need
know
that
how many
really.
offenses
Yeah,
scare me in the NFC.
exactly.
I mean,
Yeah, they're playing the best out of the teams out there. Maybe you throw San Francisco in there occasionally, but I
yeah,
mean,
the best team not named Philadelphia. I mean,
yeah,
one of them anyway.
yeah, yeah. Um, so we go from good teams to struggling teams, teams that we thought would be good. The Packers and the Buccaneers both lost to struggling teams with backup quarterbacks, and in Tampa's case, third string quarterback. Um, who are you more concerned about right now?
The Packers, and here's why. I circled back and watched the film on both of those games. Didn't get a chance to watch them live, but circle back and watch the film. The Buccaneers. I mean, Brady's a little out of focus. Obviously, he's
Yeah,
got some stuff going on in his personal life, but honest to gosh, I mean, theirs is just a health issue. I mean, the offensive line is they're playing third stringers. Tom hasn't had a whole lot of time when Mike Evans and
yeah,
Chris Godwin are all in the field at the same time. So, yeah, I think if Brady can refocus, they get a bye week, and then
get
receivers can
everybody
stay
healthy.
healthy. O line
Yeah,
plays a little better. I don't think with as weak as the NFC is, I don't feel like they're out of it. But then when I watch the Packers, Travis, that's a whole different issue. I mean, they've got O line
yeah,
problems, and that D was supposed to be a lot better than it was. But man, it is so evident when you put the film on how much trust Rodgers does not have in his wide receivers.
yeah,
I mean, it is insane. I
yes,
mean, he's they showed a stat during that game where he is not throwing the ball past 10, 15 yards, like at
hmm,
all, not taking shots at all. So I don't know how that gets better because these young wide receivers, I mean, they're not first round studs like we've seen. I mean, they're a
yeah,
little bit later draft around guys. I mean, they need, if anything, instead of somebody that doesn't trust them and is, yelling at them and stuff. I mean, I feel like they need a hug, someone to put an arm around. I mean, this league's tough, it's hard to win. And Rodgers
yeah,
just looks like he's just totally shutting them out and ghosting them in games if they make a bad play.
yeah. I mean, with Rodgers too, he doesn't look like the same quarterback either. It looks like there's huge disconnect. I mean, he still got the talent, but there's something off about not just the offense, but the way he's playing too.
Man, and every time it gets like this is when the disconnect comes between Rodgers and the coach, Rodgers in the
Yeah,
front office. I mean, you got him, Rodgers at podium saying we need to simplify the offense, and then he leaves, and Matt LaFleur walks up there and they ask him, and he's like, I don't know what he's talking about. And we saw this with Mike McCarthy and the rest of the Packers front office. So I'm interested to see because I don't see a quick fix to this to turn around and save the season. I'm not saying that they're done for. I don't see this as something that just gets fixed, overnight.
yeah, I agree with that, and I don't remember their schedule offhand right now, but I think their schedule doesn't really ease up very much compared to the
No, I know.
defense they're
I know they
playing.
got Philly coming up in
Yeah,
late November, early December. So I mean, yeah, I mean, and Minnesota's in their division. They got to play them. I
Yeah,
mean,
they're rolling.
Justin Fields looked good the other day, so we'll see.
Yeah.
Travis, let me ask you, man. Lions fan, got a chance to attend the Lions Cowboys game.
Yeah.
Lions fans were going ham on Twitter, man. They want Dan Campbell no more kneecap chewing. They want him out of there, man. You were at the game. You're a Lions fan. Are fans overreacting? What's your opinion?
Yes, they're absolutely overreacting. I mean, the fans that want him gone, to me, need a reality check. I mean, there's a lot of people trying to kind of go back to when Jim Caldwell got fired and comparing it to when Jim Caldwell was the head coach, and that's just not fair, especially from a roster talent standpoint. What a lot of people don't realize is that Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn just completely decimated that roster of all its best talent and just ran everybody out of town.
Yeah, this wasn't a
And
good team that Dan Campbell took
yeah,
over.
yeah, people are having real short-term memories of this because last offseason there were like legitimate national publications were projecting the Lions to go 0-17 on the season. And so if you have a roster that badly, you're already in probably the worst situation in the NFL taking over. And so I know people hate Lions fans, especially hate hearing, be patient or whatever, but somehow Hard Knocks convinced everybody that this team was going to be good when they weren't in a position to be good again.
Dude, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
I believe that because they didn't make a whole lot of moves that got better in the offseason. So essentially, you're looking at the same team that, as you mentioned, Travis, a year ago, national publications were saying these guys might not win a game. There wasn't a whole lot of roster turnover. I mean, yeah, they pick up Aiden Hutchinson and they get that good wide receiver from Bama, who, by the way, hasn't even played a game yet. I mean, Hard Knocks, you're right. They became the love story of the NFL, and somehow – and I'm guilty of it myself, and not as a Lions fan. And I was looking at it going, my gosh, maybe they're more talented than we thought. I mean, because they played so hard last year.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. You'll have people kind of going at Dan Campbell's in-game decisions, which is fair, but they're also starting to go at his leadership. To me, he's the reason they've been in a lot of games with his leadership. Like he gets his players to buy in. I don't see they've been playing better than a 1-5 team this year. I don't see how, even though they are 1-5, I don't see how people can be saying that he's lost the locker room or anything. And then I think, going back to that whole 0-17 thing, the comparison should really be to like when Jim Schwartz took over the team trying to rebuild from that 0-16 season. And you look at that, they went 2-14 in his first year. And this was all with the first 2 years were with Matthew Stafford hurt. So they didn't even have the quarterback. They're playing with backup quarterbacks.
Good point.
So they went 2-14. And then the next year they started the season 2-10 and then won the last 4 games of the season. So you're looking for progress kind of like that. And so far, I think they've overall shown that, even though there's been some stumbles and bumps along the way.
And they say the progression is when you're taking over a program like what Dan Campbell inherited, you start out, you lose by a lot, then you lose by a little, then you win some games by a little, and then if you get it turned around, year 3, 4, 5, then you start winning by a lot. Let me ask you, because Travis, you and I talked about this, and I kind of said, hey, what's your opinion, before this, because I saw one of the stuff I saw on Twitter about the Lions. You immediately were like, look, everybody needs to just calm down. Like, I'm seeing it too. It's ridiculous. I don't know where these expectations come from. Let me ask you this, Travis. Do you think Dan Campbell is a legitimate coach that if the Lions improve their roster with the picks and they continue to do so, that he could lead them into a playoff win? And do you think Jared Goff can be a guy?
Well, I have 2 very different answers on both those guys. I very much like Dan Campbell, and I think that he's a great leader. Now, the X's and O's argument is still, to be debated and all that. But he's definitely made some mistakes in some game management situations, especially with time management and all that. But I think he's the kind of guy that people like to play for, and so that tells me that he can be successful. I don't know if he will be. And then Goff, I'm I was out on him at the beginning when they got him. I didn't even want him. And then he kind of started to play really well at the end of last year and the beginning of this year.
Yeah,
But
down the stretch last year. Yeah.
yep. I think it was like he had a stretch where he threw like 11 touchdown passes, only one interception.
Hey,
But
look good. The lines
yeah,
look good.
he looked all right. And then they I saw he turns the ball over too much is basically what it comes down to. I saw some stat that he's like, I don't know, first or second in turnovers in the past few years among quarterbacks, and he had 4 of them on Sunday against the Cowboys, which, you know, that was a close game without those turnovers. And so I don't. And another thing I saw in that game was he seemed to have, you know, not always a super clean pocket, but there were times when he didn't need to like vacate the pocket and he was vacating the pocket. It made things harder on the offense. So I don't really see how that can translate into leading the team to the wins on a bigger scale.
Yeah, it's interesting, and like we all know, I mean, the stuff with Dan Campbell, and I'm sure there are some people, and especially some older line fans that may not like some of the antics that come with Dan Campbell. But say what you want, but I don't think there's any question that he's a very good leader of young men. Like you said, X's and O's is still kind of to be determined, but like we all know that those antics are funny at first, but if you don't win, they become put under a
Right.
microscope. So that's a situation that we'll keep an eye on. But I know you definitely had some thoughts on that game. Travis, let me ask you: Bengals Falcons. Did you get a chance to check that one out? Looked like I didn't see it live, but circling back to some of the film, it looked like Burrow went absolutely insane, and the Bengals defense looked like they kind of showed up and put a complete game together for once.
Yeah, I think the week before, I forget who they played the week before, but the offense started showing more signs of life, and you kind of got more of the Joe Burrow from last year, and it was really good to see them pick that up and uh, do that again the next week, even though it was against the Falcons. And it was good to see the defense finally play like a legitimate defense. Like they hadn't been playing very well. Again, it's Marcus Mariota and whoever the heck, Atlanta has on offense these days. So it's not that great, but it's good enough to say that, you're a little more comfortable with where they're at and maybe they can start rolling a little bit. I'm a little concerned about the running game for Cincinnati because Joe Mixon hasn't done a ton this year, and he's been a vital part of their offense over the past couple of years.
Yeah, you're right. And New Orleans Saints last week, you're absolutely right on that too. He did start to
Yeah.
look good down the stretch towards the end of that game in terms of Burrow. I agree with you on the rushing part. Joe Burrow was second on the team. He had 3 carries for 20 yards and a touchdown. I mean, Joe Mixon had 11 carries for
58,
40,
I think it was.
yeah, 40,
Yeah.
50 yards and a tud. So, I mean, he wasn't far behind being the second leading rusher of the team, which if I had to venture, I would guess Cincinnati would not want that.
Yeah. When your quarterback's not a
And it
running
looks like
quarterback.
yeah, and especially as much as he's been hit and already
Yeah.
injured, with an ACL and then
Oh, yeah.
appendix, which obviously wasn't his fault. But yeah, I think they seem to address the offensive line. Burrow's not getting hit as much back there, but it seems like it's all pass blocking. They're having a tough time getting anything started on the ground, whether it's P. Ryan or Mixon himself. So
Yeah.
that's one we'll keep an eye on. But maybe that's a turning point for Cincinnati, for the rest of the season moving forward. Um, Bears Patriots, man, what we all watched that one. I mean, I'll be the first to admit that I thought that one was going to be a snooze fest, but
Yeah.
actually turned out to be a pretty good game. Do you think, Travis, was this an outlier for the Bears? Was this a one-off? Is this something they can build on? And on the opposite end of the token there, what do you think happens in New England? We got a QB controversy.
Yeah. So I'll start with Chicago. That offensive performance surprised the hell out of me. I've never thought highly of what they have on offense this year. But they showed me that they can do it. It's just is there consistency there? Because that was the first time they've scored that much, this season. They've been in low scoring battles. I think that was the best game that Justin Fields has played in his career so far. And I think, Chicago is really more of a defensive oriented team this year, and that definitely helped in this with the turnovers that came from Zappe and all that, but it still wasn't very close to anyway. Now, the quarterback controversy, they came out today and said that Mac Jones is still their starter. So I don't think we're going to see a lot of that. But if he continues to struggle, you might hear some more fans calling for it. But Zappe didn't play that well in this game anyway.
No, you're right. And look, first off, as far as the Bears, I don't know what this is. I mean, they seem to have
It's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, they seem to have been getting a little better each week. But I'm having a hard time deciding if that was, I mean, certainly it was a confidence booster for them, and hopefully they can build off of it. But, obviously they traded Robert Quinn today. So, I mean, losing a guy like that on defense doesn't necessarily help, even though most of their struggles have been on offense. The two rookie DBs they drafted have looked really good.
Really
Kyler
good,
Gordon out of Washington and Jaquan Brisker, safety from Penn State. So I don't know what it is, but regardless at its base, it's a confidence builder. As for quarterback controversy in New England, what I don't understand is if the leash was that short for Mac, if the leash was 3 for 6, 20-some yards and a pick, why would you even do that? Because they can say what they want today, Travis, and say, oh, Mac's our starter.
Right.
But here's the reality. The guy's out for 2 weeks with an injury. He took you to the playoffs last year. Bailey Zappe comes in, lights it on fire. You put Mac in on a primetime Thursday night game at home. You give him a short leash to go 3 for 6 with a pick and pull him in the first quarter. Now your franchise young quarterback is sitting on the sidelines, and the entire stadium is chanting Bailey Zappe's name.
Yeah.
I mean, they kept panning to Mac Jones, and I mean, the kid handled it phenomenal. But I'm sitting there looking at it like, my gosh, this league is hard. Why would I just don't understand it. If the leash was that short, or you were worried about Mac getting hurt, then play Bailey Zappe.
Yeah.
Play him, and guess what? At halftime, if it's not going well, then you can put Mac in, or let Bailey finish the game. And if he does great, then great. You can start Mac the following week or make a decision from there. I just don't see any benefit in letting Mac start a primetime game going 3 for 6 with a pick and pulling it. I don't care how they spin it; it looks bad.
Yeah, and I mean, the spin zone on that was Belichick telling everybody after the game that was planned. But if it was planned, then why would you leave him on the bench for the rest of the game, the entire 3 quarters?
It makes no sense.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I don't get it at all.
Travis, let's go to some of the bigger questions for what we saw this past week and moving forward. What do you think, with all the injuries that happened with the Jets, what do you think the outlook's going to be losing Breece Hall? Can the offense keep it together? They just got Zach Wilson back. What's their outlook for the offense and Zach Wilson the rest of the season, you think?
Yeah, I mean, they made that trade for James Robinson, so that helps a little bit. I still don't think he's totally healthy from the injury he had last year, but he's had a good couple games in Jacksonville this year. So they'll have him and Michael Carter as the running backs. Michael Carter had a very solid rookie season, wasn't getting as many touches with Breece Hall in there, but maybe he'll get a bigger workload with Robinson coming in and not being what he used to be. And then I'll say this, their running game was basically what was driving their offense, I think. And so if they're, Zach Wilson's a talented young guy, but we don't really know what their offense looks like when they have to rely on him more than they have to rely on that running game. So I would have a little bit of concern if they have to suddenly lean on that passing game more than they want to.
I think that's a great point, especially because we haven't really got to see long stretches of Zach Wilson. It's been interrupted by Mike White and Joe Flacco, who, oddly enough, both of them looked really good in his absence. So I don't know what to make of it. I'll tell you this, as far as the outlook for the offense, in my opinion, I do like the trade. I still think they
Uh-huh.
have two good backs now with him and Michael Carter. But man, I don't know. It's not just Brees Hall. It's they lost Mekhi Becton early in the season.
Yeah.
They just lost Vera Tucker for the season. They signed George Fant in the offseason. He's out. And then they signed Dwayne Brown to replace those guys outside as a tackle. He didn't last 7 days and got a season-ending injury. I just think that's too much.
Yeah.
And honestly, I hate
A
that
great
because
point. Yeah.
Zach Wilson, it just it looks bad because of the way that Mike White and Joe Flacco in his absence have came in and essentially balled. I hate to see that for the young kid who's had some tough luck. And we know, man, New York's not an easy place to play. So I don't know what's going to happen with that, but
Yeah.
that's going to be a tough one. We'll keep an eye on that one down in there in New York. Question I have, Travis,
Yep.
is one that I've actually been pondering is how long does Cliff Kingsbury stay in Arizona, and is kind of like I asked you about Dan Campbell, is he the real deal? Can he win in Arizona?
Well, he's shown he can get them to the playoffs, so I guess that's something he can hang his hat on. But the way they've played this year, I mean, granted they didn't have DeAndre Hopkins, and he played really well in his first game back. I think he had over 100 receiving yards, 10 catches, something like that. So that's good to see for them. But their team hasn't been playing with like the same hunger and the same desire, it seems like, this year. And the offense, from what I've seen, isn't working at the same clip, and their defense has never been anything special. I think I've said that several times on the show before. So there are things in his favor, but there's a lot, especially this season, going against him. So I would say he's definitely his seats starting to get pretty warm if it wasn't already.
I 100% agree with you. And here's where I struggle with Cliff is it's I have nothing against Cliff, and I certainly understand that that's not you
Hmm.
don't have any either, and that's not what you were saying. But I don't have anything against Cliff, but I've wanted to think that he's a good coach, especially in college. But I sometimes I sit back and I think and I go, look at Patrick Mahomes. I mean, he was in Texas Tech where no name quarterbacks in the Big 12 throw for
Yeah.
5,000 yards. I mean, he made Pat Mahomes at Texas Tech look pedestrian.
Yeah.
Now you go to Arizona and you get we know what happens with Arizona. They give up on the Josh Rosen experience and go to Kyler, which is fine.
Yeah.
But for all intents and purposes, when you look at it, a lot of Kyler's highlights have been him running around, extending the play or running, taking off and running with it. I mean, and
Hmm.
that's okay. But I mean, those two quarterbacks, I don't know if I could find two better quarterbacks that I would think would fit a Cliff Kingsbury offense. And he's managed to make both of them look pedestrian. Now, there's been some other extenuating circumstances. They've had injuries. I get it. You mentioned it, and you've said it multiple times. The defense hasn't been good. There's been some weird stuff with, some of the lingo and Kyler's contract and
Yeah.
Call of Duty. Call of Duty comes out and the guy
Definitely.
says "screw football." He's on FaZe Clan, right? There was that weird thing in the offseason where the owner was pissed off that they blew a late game surge and
Yeah.
lost in the playoffs and didn't want to pay coaches bonuses. So I don't know what's going on up there, but I think you kind of summed it up. The seat's getting warmer if he doesn't continue to win, because at the end of the day, that's all it's about, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Let me ask you this as well, Travis, which might be a question that not only us but a lot of our fans listening have. When do the Eagles lose?
That's a great freaking question. I can't I can't even believe I put this one in here. But uh, I was looking at their schedule and I'm not seeing many opportunities. It's so weird. Like they
Dude,
played.
I am too. So I looked at their schedule, and the
Yeah.
answer I came up with is the exact same. I don't know. So they just made the trade to get Robert Quinn. So that defense just got better.
Yeah.
And they've coming up. Their next games are the Steelers,
Yep.
the Texans,
Yep.
Commanders, Colts. I don't think they lose any of those. They
Right.
go Green Bay comes to Lincoln Financial on November 27th.
I
That's at
think the
home.
defense gives Philly the advantage in that one.
Yeah. And then Titans after that, and then the first loss I could honestly potentially maybe see, and I think I'm going to sound insane saying this, but
Yeah.
maybe
I know
we
where you're going.
maybe the Giants December 11th, that game's in East Rutherford, New York. But if you would have told me a couple months ago that the Eagles haven't lost yet, and oh, by the way, the Giants are 5-1.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have said, get out of here. There's
The,
no way that the Giants will beat the Eagles if they're
yeah.
undefeated at that point.
Yeah. The three it's weird. Of all those games that are left, I only had three legitimate chances to me, or Tennessee, the first or one of the Giants games, and then Dallas. So I guess that's technically four. But I mean, that's going all the way to possibly week 16 without a loss.
Yeah, man, we're
I mean,
talking like
that's
they might lose one of those games because they rest people because they're
yeah,
undefeated. I mean,
yeah.
that's insane, dude.
I mean, that brings up an interesting question that we don't really have time for. But like, do you rest those people in that case? That's
If you
something
have a
that's not
shot
going
at
to
if you have
answer.
a shot at undefeated,
Yeah, exactly.
dude, I don't know. What would you? I mean, I guess yes, I would rest them and I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole, but I guess yes, just because at the end of the day, like I would much rather have a Super Bowl potentially than a regular season record. But I don't know.
Yeah.
All right, Travis, we'll move along here and we'll close it out with week 8, looking at some of the slates upcoming. We got 49ers, Rams, Packers, Bills, Giants, Seahawks, Broncos, Jags. Pretty decent slate of games, but
It's all right.
yeah. I mean, yeah, it is all right at best, I guess. Let me ask you one thing I'm curious about, though, that's not necessarily on this slate of games is we saw the news with the week with Matt Ryan being
Mm-hmm.
shoulder injury / we were going to bench him anyway, which is the weirdest thing in the world to say. But that gives Sam Ehlinger, the young QB from UT, who put up some prolific numbers, he gets the nod. They move on to the young guy. What should we expect from Sam Ehlinger? What should Colts fans expect, Travis?
Yeah. So, when he was at UT, he's a strong arm, very mobile guy, very athletic quarterback. Much like Matt Ryan's basically a statue at this point, so he's going to be uh, much more fit for today's NFL than Matt Ryan is at this point in his career. But he's only got 3 NFL passing attempts from when I looked earlier. Looked okay in the preseason, and I just like for them, I would say you have Jonathan Taylor, why not use him? And then have Ehlinger get comfortable off of that, especially when it's that Washington defense. Washington's not a great team, but it's not a ideal defense that you want to be going up for against in your first career start.
No, I agree, and I think you nailed it. I think the big thing is Matt Ryan became the statue. There's obvious major issues along that offensive line, and they're not being able to get Jonathan Taylor, who looked like a surefire MVP candidate last year. I mean, looks totally pedestrian. But I think with some of that, they have some big receivers in Michael Pittman and Paris Campbell and young rookie Alec Pierce. So
Yeah,
I think if he can get out of the pocket expenses, they run some basic crossing routes and outs and let those big body wide receivers, kind of box out, if you will. It's going to be a tough one, but hey, they're choosing to move on to him, and he's got an opportunity. So that's all you can ask for if you're Sam Ehlinger, right?
yeah. I mean, you got to make it's a what have you done for me lately business. So he's gotta show up.
One game I'm really looking forward into, particular, even though it's not a great slate of games, as you mentioned, is I didn't think I'd say this months ago, is Giants Seahawks. Man, what's
Yeah,
your prediction on that one? Who comes out on top?
it's in Seattle, isn't it? So that
You know what? I don't know, Travis.
I, I have it written down as in Seattle, so I'm going to act like it's in Seattle.
I think you're
So,
right.
I mean,
Yes, that is in Seattle.
I think
Sorry.
for the Giants, Daniel Jones is going to be very important because the Seahawks have really struggled defending the pass, and no Giants receivers have more than 200 receiving yards or have even hit 200 receiving yards or more than 1 touchdown from when I looked. So that could be a game where their passing game kind of finally breaks out. Seattle's defense gives up a lot of points, but their offense, I think, could be the difference in that one. Is a little more consistent than the Giants one. So I'm going to go Seattle because of the offense.